It's Not a Boy. Chapter 7. One Autumn Morning, Part 2. The fat nurse, I was going to call her fat because I didn't like her, whether Mam said or not, came for a second time, and she put her stuff out on the table again, and then she took her new gabardine coat off and rolled her sleeves up. I stood there frozen to our stone floor, thinking she was going to cut me up there and then on our kitchen table. "There's nothing to be frightened of, my dear," she said, smiling. Well, she might not have anything to be frightened for. She wasn't having an operation. I licked my lips while that bullet of fear shot through me again, and I knew it was no good running away this time. Mam had warned me. I had to give in. What else could I do? "Now come along, my dear," said the nurse, and then she jabbed a needle in my arm, looked in my mouth, and hit my knees with a rubber hammer. I sat on our old couch and just let her do what she had to do. "Good, well, that's all. Now that was nothing to be frightened of, was it, my dear?" She smiled, patted my head, and put her shiny tools back in her bag and clipped it shut. And then she rolled her sleeves down, put her gabardine back on, and that was the end of that. I went to school and everything seemed normal again, and I hoped that if I didn't think about that operation, it would go away and nothing would happen. But somewhere at the back of my mind, I knew that it could. Anyway, that term we started singing, and I really enjoyed it, and I found out that if I sang very loudly, it drowned out my fear. We were singing about a hunter, John Peel. "Dear Ken John Peel with his coat so gay." I was glad he hunted foxes, and I hoped he got them, because they killed our hens. Just because I forgot to get anybody to lock them up that time when I went to Helen's, they went in and got them all. I took a great gulp of breath and sung even louder as the hounds ran faster and faster to kill the fox, and I was glad. My dad and Uncle Sid used to kill foxes as well, but they didn't use hounds like John Peel. They used guns. They used to hunt the foxes down and shoot them. My dad's gun was in a room in our house called Understairs. We had kitchen, we had passage, we had big room, and we had understairs. There was no light understairs, and there were coats hanging. We kept our wellies in there, and the ceiling sloped down and down, and as you went to the bottom end, it got darker and darker and was quite frightening, but you knew that at any time you could get out. Dad's gun was kept right at the end of Understairs. I used to go there, bent double, and hold that gun and feel its two cold, oily barrels and its smooth wooden handle. His cartridges were in a box on the shelf above my head. I used to get them and roll them in my hands and smell the gunpowder. Then one day, last spring, my dad's gun was not there. Dad and Uncle Sid had gone into our woods with their guns, and I saw Dad had a spade over his shoulder as well. They were hunting for foxes in the old sandbags in our woods. The sandbags had protected the soldiers in the war and protected me from the nurse the first time, but it was not a safe place for foxes. Dad and Uncle Sid were determined to dig the foxes out. When they came back, Dad had a sack over his shoulder. They dug out the fox's lair and shot the mother and father fox and brought the babies back in the sack. Dad threw it under our milk stand and you could see them groping about in there. Dad said it was full of young foxes and there were too many to waste cartridges on. When he had gone, our Gwendy and me carefully opened the neck of the bag and it was tied with binder twine, but we looked inside and there we saw some foxglove cubs and they just looked like ginger puppies. They were lovely. Suddenly I began to feel a bit sorry for foxes always being hunted. I knew that they killed our hens, but after all they had to eat and they had to feed their baby cubs. Dad said there's always two sides to every story, and I was beginning to see what he meant. Our Gwendy felt sorry for those cubs as well, and so secretly we decided to feed them. We got the pet lamb's bottle and went to them with some milk and fed them. And they loved it, and their little front paws pawed the air. But next day when we went back with some milk, the young cubs had gone, and Dad said that he'd thrown them into our drain with a brick in their sack. I could hardly bear to think of them going down and down in the dark water, trying to gasp for breath. And they could have looked up and seen the pale sky above them and struggled uselessly to get out. And now they were dead at the bottom of our drain, and they would drift into the Humber and into the North Sea. That was at the end, and that was the end of our springtime fox cubs. Now, though, as I have said, it was autumn, and the leaves were falling just like the rose petals had, and I tried not to remember the foxes because it was not a good time for me to be thinking about dead things with my operation coming up. And that operation was nearer than I thought, because one day our Gwendy and Katie went to school, but I didn't, and I couldn't understand it. Mum didn't say anything, and I didn't feel poorly, but I still didn't have to go to school. Mum suddenly told me it was my operation day. And in a flash, I was sitting on a hospital bed wearing a nightie that Mum had made especially for my operation. Mum was in her navy wedding suit and Dad was in his funeral suit. And then they left me. "Ta-ra!" shouted Dad as they walked quickly down the children's ward. "You shouldn't say that. You should say goodbye," corrected Mum, and they rushed off back to their farm to get on with their work. I was left in bed, and there was no comforting crack in the mattress and no Lucky Charm bracelet to wear. No jewellery was allowed in here, of course. I lay on my back staring at that green distempered ceiling, and the next morning it was still there, and there was no getting away from it. "Hello, dear. I'm Nurse Gentle," said a nurse, and she put me in a hospital nightie with a slit down the back. Then she was on to the next girl. "Hello, dear." When she had finished going down the long line of kids in beds, she cleared her throat and said in a loud voice, "Now, children, we're all going to the theatre. Isn't that nice?" I thought of Helen and her theatre and how good she was at dancing. Yes, it would be nice to go to the theatre again, but of course you do not go to the theatre in a nightie with a slit down the back. Then Nurse Gentle was talking again, so I had no time to think it through. "Now, you are all going to meet Uncle Sid." Well, of course, I knew that it wouldn't be my real Uncle Sid. He was there at home, working on the land, and my father was with the animals. Then suddenly some doors swung open, and out popped a man in a big green gown with a green hat and a white cloth over his face. "Here he is, children, and you will go and see him in turn. Isn't that nice?" smiled Nurse Gentle, and she clapped and he took a bow like they did at Helen's theatre. Soon it was my turn, and I went through the swing doors, lying on a trolley. This, of course, was not a real theatre.